right to do whatever I want as president.
The government shutdown, now officially the longest in American history.
President Trump threatening the future of health care.
The president's budget includes a cut of $845 billion to Medicare.
President Trump apparently has a lot on his mind, at least according to his Twitter account.
Concerns that the new missiles could reach the United States.
And ISIS is seizing this chaotic moment to regroup.
I have the right to do whatever I want as president.
Priorities USA Action is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Join Milwaukee Film virtually for the Minority Health Film Festival, presented by the Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin Health Network, taking place now through September 24th. Watch 50 films plus conversations about the health and well-being of families, communities, and institutions. Tickets are on sale now at mkefilm.org/MHFF. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. As we are barreling toward November 3rd, the election, of course, but only one part of what we are barreling toward. It seems like we're barreling toward a fate for the people of the United States, as Donald Trump does have the votes to confirm an evangelical Catholic to the U.S. Supreme Court in one Amy Coney Barrett. They haven't really kept it much of a secret that she is the favorite. And I said some time ago that the day of the week in which Donald Trump announces who his nominee is depends on the level of controversy. Whenever you have important information that you don't want to be sensationalized all week, you wait until the end of the week before you release that information. And we've seen that here when there were, polling location changes and all sorts of other things that were inconsistent with our April 7th election. Those press releases come Friday at 4:00. Or if there's a public hearing about something that has enticed and excited a lot of people in the city of Milwaukee, you don't want a lot of people showing up at that public meeting yelling and screaming, you have the announcement, the press release at 4:30 on a Friday. Well, Donald Trump is making his announcement on a Saturday, which means it is so controversial, he does not want it to happen at all during the week, because on weekends, their attention is shifted, the schedules are different, but he is going to have to deal with that for the duration of the weekend. And we shouldn't say we didn't see this coming. And I think that a lot of time has been wasted expecting this administration, because it isn't just him. And I don't want to make people think that it's just him, because ultimately the things that need to get cleaned up in our government don't just go away if Donald Trump is no longer president. And the U.S. Supreme Court is just one example. Amy Coney Barrett, if she lives as long as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, will be on that court for 39 years. Now, in the next 39 years, there will be other changes and shifts. But in the meantime, this is going to be very, very tough. But we knew it. Democrats always knew it. But every opportunity that arises, and maybe that's the American spirit, whenever there's an opportunity to do good or to do right, or for Trump and his allies to show a level of decency, we think they're going to take it, but they don't. They've been very, very clear about their path, and that's why Donald Trump's nominee, whether it's Amy Coney Barrett or not, it's a consistency that they have followed that has just been so incredibly hard to believe. Because I never could have imagined an America quite like this one. But alas, here we go. Might be the America that we deserve, right? The one that we vote for or don't vote for is the one that we oftentimes get. A few other things today. Dr. Monique Liston is going to call in. She's hosting a panel this evening with the Minority Health Film Festival. And the topic is one that is not only timely, but I think it's going to be very informative. And so the panel discussion is called "We've Been Here, Women of Color Fighting for Justice." And I find this topic so interesting and also so timely, because we saw what it looks like when people who normally don't get involved and don't protest get involved in protests. And you saw Frank Nitty here in the city of Milwaukee and others walking through suburban neighborhoods and people coming out of their houses, raising their fists, or people knowing where the Nitty March was going to be. And they had their, their Black Lives Matter signs already. So when the protesters walked past, they could show solidarity. Some folks walked with them. A lot of people have sent me messages and have communicated via our group on Facebook that they decided to get off the couch, go march with the protesters. And if you've never done something before, especially something as powerful as fighting for justice, because there's no way that you can be an American and live in America and not know that there are grave injustices. I mean, people know that. It's just they don't go protest. And when they do, and then they go to another protest, and then they're looking for another way to give or to help or to have their voice heard. Those people, God bless them, think that it's new and there aren't other people doing what they're doing because they have this inspired feeling, and they're not aware of all of the other people that have been doing this work, mostly in the shadows and very, very quietly. And then what you have is this cohort of new people, young people, might be suburbanites, that begin their own organizing coalitions around Black Lives Matter. And I watched all of this unfold and I had a bunch of mixed emotions about it, because my thing was, what about the people that have been fighting and doing this work before you got inspired to get off of your couch? But let me not say anything negative about the people who finally decide to get into the fight. I don't want to say anything negative about them, but what they cannot do is disparage those or ignore those that have been fighting and have never been getting any recognition for it. And that's the delicate dance that we have to do with one another, because when Black people are fighting for anything, it doesn't become credible until the movement is fortified with diversity. When I say fortified with diversity, when I'm talking about a Black movement, I mean fortified with white people. Good morning, Kelly Turner and Tutu Reeves. Glad you guys could join us via the YouTube. And so what Dr. Monique Liston is going to discuss is the women of color that have been doing this work. Let's not forget about them. Let's not forget about all of the people that have been trying to bring these issues to the forefront before things got so out of control. Because now the discourse is so elevated that if there's another officer involved shooting, or we see evidence of police brutality, and we will, dash cam, body cam, or bystander cell phone footage, there probably is going to be violence in the streets. Because I don't want anyone to think that the violence that we see in the streets after an officer involved shooting is just about that particular incident. These are also local issues. It's just that it's happening in so many localities that it looks like it's national. It's a local issue because we don't know what else was happening in Kenosha. We didn't know what else was going on when it comes to race relations and Black male unemployment and Black male incarceration in Minneapolis. We don't know these other situations that are boiling under the surface. And then when they see the officer involved shooting, or when they see the excessive forces, all of those issues that come to a head, it is usually the spark that ignites the blaze when it's the police, because they are seen as holding this system that does not allow certain individuals to realize their full potential. If you're Black and you're in the wrong neighborhood, somebody can call the cops on you simply because you look suspicious. It's that. It's this tight grip on trying to maintain a particular type of order in society, where a Black kid walking with a hoodie can get shot. And then the person that shoots them becomes a hero. So you have that. And you have all the other oppressive factors, the coronavirus notwithstanding. It's just me, broadcasting from Wisconsin, and we have the second highest case spike with the coronavirus in the nation of any state of any size. Like, we're up there with California. California is, population-wise, 8 Wisconsins, and we have a similar rise in coronavirus cases as a state with 40 million people. And I would say it is the Republican leadership, because they always want to talk about blue cities and the Democrat-run cities and these Democrat mayors. What needs to be thoroughly understood, because I'm tired of having to repeat this, is that these Democrat-run cities are often under the thumb of Republican-controlled states via gerrymandered legislative districts. If you're the mayor of a city, it is the governor who is the chief executive in that state. But the legislature also has just as much power as the governor. If the legislature is Republican, like in the state of Wisconsin, when Tony Evers was elected in 2018, the first package of bills that the Republicans did, it wasn't relief for taxpayers, it wasn't additional funding for schools, it wasn't for infrastructure, it wasn't for any of that. It was a series of bills that limited Tony Evers' power. Tony Evers has just reissued a statewide mask mandate for 60 more days. I wonder why, because Wisconsin, as small of a state as we are just seeing this rapid and precipitous growth in coronavirus cases. At the same time, Donald Trump is trying to take away the Affordable Care Act. And best believe if Amy Coney Barrett gets on the U.S. Supreme Court, Obamacare is done. That is the first thing they're trying to do. That is why Donald Trump wants to get this woman confirmed so quickly, so they can finally axe Obamacare. When John McCain gave that famous, if not infamous, thumbs down, because he would have been the deciding vote to completely overturn Obamacare, the Republicans, including the Trump administration, have been racing and chasing that moment, because John McCain is the one that saved it. And I don't want to give him all that much credit, because he wasn't all that much of a friend to Barack Obama. But when it came down to Americans' healthcare, John McCain's thumbs down is what led Donald Trump to want to pick a Supreme Court justice that will ultimately overturn and do in the Affordable Care Act during a pandemic. However, I digress. Republican-controlled legislatures make it extremely difficult for like Milwaukee. It's a Democratic city. The majority of our elected officials here are Democrats. Even in nonpartisan offices, they affiliate with the Democratic Party. They support Democratic candidates. Most of them have endorsed Tony Evers. And if you can withhold resources and opportunity from a city that you know is blue, from a city that you know is majority Democratic voters and Democratic elected officials, then that city is going to falter. You can't survive without resources. We're a large city, relatively large anyway, largest in the state of Wisconsin. So there are certain needs the city of Milwaukee has that other smaller towns do not, other smaller jurisdictions do not. But because we bring so much economic activity, if the city of Milwaukee wants to make different decisions about its resources, about its police force, about how we protect public health, how we look at public safety, we should be able to do that, because if it wasn't for the city of Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin wouldn't have any money. Problem is, Republicans will never make any substantial gain in the city of Milwaukee, starve Milwaukee of resources, and we suffer. We see the negative indicators go up, we see the negative statistics go up, and then what do those Republicans do? They blame the Democratic mayor, or they blame African Americans for continuing to vote for Democrats. See, look what happens when you vote for Democrats, Black people. Look at your cities, look at all the crime, look at all the violence. They're not telling the whole story. The whole story is they mapped this out. If we keep resources, and if we take away local control from Milwaukee to where Milwaukee is not controlled by Milwaukee, Milwaukee is controlled by outstate Republicans, what do you think the city of Milwaukee is going to look like? And then they blame us. They're gaslighting an entire city. This is what you get when you vote for Democrats. Boy, that Tom Barrett, he's not doing anything for you guys, when it's Robin Vos and his other colleagues that are trying to hurt Milwaukee every opportunity they get. And what do we have to show for it? Second highest rise in coronavirus cases in the entire country. Tony Evers wants to do the right thing, wants to reinstall a mask mandate for 60 more days. And guess what? Tony Evers is going to get sued by the Republicans here in the state. Does that make any sense to you? Does anything that is happening right now in this nation make any sense to you? We have completely abandoned all decency in the realm of politics. It's more than embarrassing. We're going to end up paying for this one way or another, whether with money, with lives, and they won't stop. They will not stop until it's mutually assured destruction. I swear the Republicans just want everybody in the ground. Terribly unfortunate. from Fox 9, the state of Wisconsin has seen an 88% increase in new COVID-19 cases over the last 2 weeks, which is the largest rate in the nation. According to new data from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, the 1,271 new positive cases reported on Monday means the state has gone 7 straight days with more than 1,200 cases, and 11 of the last 12 days too. The average percent positive rate during that time is more than 16%, a new high. So if Joe Biden gets elected, and right now I don't know what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. I'd like to believe every single poll that I read. Good morning, Diana. Karen Siegler, good morning to you as well. I want to think that Joe Biden is going to landslide this election. He's going to win. And if he does, I really hope so for a variety of reasons, most of which should be pretty obvious. He's going to implement a national mask mandate. Why? Because people are not going to take the coronavirus vaccine. They're not. People that get vaccines that are not anti-vaxxers, and anti-vaxxers are a problem. I got a story about them as well. They're going to drive the coronavirus being a permanent fixture in America. They're going to be responsible for that in part, to where 10 years from now, I hope not that long, 3 years from now, there'll still be a number of people hospitalized with the coronavirus, because by then, the normal amount of time it takes to come up with an adequate vaccine that's sufficient enough in 50+% of the population, it's going to take years. Now, we're trying to rush it for political purposes. Politics is one thing. Health and research is another. Research on a vaccine that will be effective doesn't care about the election, but the politicians care about the election, and they want, Trump says there's going to be a vaccine by November 3rd. And I wouldn't take it. Because you can't trust the CDC or the National Institute of Health when Donald Trump has and plays a role in what they say. Like the science, that the research that they have goes to him first. If there are things in it that he doesn't like because it makes him and his administration look bad, they omit it, and it's cost Americans their lives. But getting the vaccine, because we politicized health, which as you can't really get worse than that. Wearing a mask is almost like a political statement, and people are using their masks to make political statements. But now if you're wearing a mask, it's in a lot of cases, you can tell what someone's political affiliation is, and it shouldn't be that way. This one comes from the Pew Research Center. U.S. public now divided over whether to get a COVID-19 vaccine. As efforts to develop and test a COVID-19 vaccine spur debate around the timing and release of a federally approved vaccine, the share of Americans who say they would get vaccinated for the coronavirus has declined sharply since earlier this year. About half of U.S. adults, 51%, say they would definitely or probably get a vaccine to prevent COVID-19 if it were available today. Nearly as many, and 49%, say they definitely or probably would not get vaccinated at the time. That's not going to, if half of the population is not going to get vaccinated, it's still going to be able to spread. And we're going to be stuck with that number for a very, very long time, because I don't know what needs to happen in the whole thinking of science and vaccines. It's going to change people's minds. That may happen gradually, but it's not going to be right away. This is this place in which we are stuck. Story goes on to say the share who would definitely get a coronavirus vaccine now stands at just 21%. Half the share that said this just 4 months ago. The vaccine has to be safe. And that's the part that should worry people, because we know who is more susceptible to have the major complications from the coronavirus, those that have these things called comorbidities. If you already have pre-existing conditions, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, etc., right? If you contract the coronavirus, your outcomes are not as good as someone who is healthy. The vaccine also has to be effective for people with comorbidities. It's not about the vaccine working well in people that are perfectly healthy. If someone is in stage 2 cancer, and of course they don't want to get the coronavirus because they're battling cancer, will the vaccine itself make their cancer worse? Or will it make their diagnosis worse? That's what we have to worry about. Not the vaccine working with healthy people, working with people who have these comorbidities. And it takes a really, really long time to figure that out, because there's a number of people that said they're going to sign up for the trial. Former Governor Tommy Thompson and president of the UW system, he said that he signed up for coronavirus vaccine trials. I think he's lying because he stuttered when he was asked that question during an interview. And so when it comes down to it, because we don't know and we can't trust the science under this administration, people just aren't going to take it. And then here's the other part. So I'm trying to figure out, like, the rush. I've never seen anything like it. I wish people would rush out and participate in making this a better country and protesting and standing up for justice and standing up for those who are marginalized. I wish people were in that, like, a rush to do that, like they were to send their kids back to school. Are you guys seeing this all over the country where schools are opening and then closing? Because there are parents that are willingly sending their kids to school that are positive for the coronavirus. I am not making this up. And then it shuts the whole school down. So in Kenosha, they had a sick out. 276 teachers called in sick, and I don't blame them. Some were already approved absences, I suppose. The others, they said they had to investigate. You know, I recently thought about this. Teachers, who I'm sure you remember a teacher or two that had a profound effect on who you are. A lot of us do. Some of us wouldn't be who we are and where we are if it wasn't for some of the teachers that we had. In the last 20 years, not only have we just marginalized teachers as a profession, and I have my issues with public education, but not with individual wonderful teachers. Just like I have my issues with policing in America, not necessarily individual police officers, because a lot of times these cops are just doing what they're told, or they're just following orders. And that's the part, the institution of policing, I have a problem with. The institution of how we educate people in this country is what I have a problem with, because there's far too many people in this country that do not know the true American story. They don't know it, or they got a bogus version of it. And so we've marginalized teachers. We push them to the side. We want them to do more with less resources. There's that. And when the outcomes are not perfect, then we blame the teachers. But the threat of dying, like, teachers can get shot in school shootings, which the only reason why we haven't had school shootings is because we haven't had school. So there's that risk that whoever thinks about that, you know, I'm 45 years old. I never really considered being a teacher, but whatever. It was never, if I was going to be a teacher, I wouldn't have had to factor in the calculus of, well, I might get shot one day and I've got to instruct my classroom on how to do mass shooter drills. So there's that. But then you have this additional risk. So it's not just blaming teachers when outcomes are poor. It's not just cutting their funding, cutting their salaries. It's not just that. It's the threat that they are under from children, whether it be armed children or children that have the coronavirus, because there has been this rush to get kids back in the classroom. It's like there's something more to that, because it just seems so counterintuitive to rush kids back to the classroom in the middle of a pandemic that's not slowing, where Wisconsin has the second highest case total in the country, and 21% of the people are going to take the vaccine if it becomes available. It's a recipe for disaster. And when you sit back and look at all of this, when you look at the entire forest of what America is right now, it almost seems like somebody else is writing this story, like the worst enemy America has ever had abroad, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, I don't know who it is, maybe they're working together, and they are the marionettes pulling the strings of this broken nation right now. And if Donald Trump gets reelected, this is an if, because I just don't know what's going to happen. Most of you don't even know how you're going to vote. Get your ballot in the mail. I'm over here telling people not to send it back in the mail. Get a whole bunch of questions in my inbox. Sherwin, what am I supposed to do with this ballot? Pray over it. If Trump gets reelected, there will be things in this nation that we will not be able to fix. Karen Siegler says it's so frustrating that had people just worn the masks, we'd be so much better off. I agree. As much as I didn't like it, nobody likes it. I'm used to it now, though. I mean, it's not a matter of liking wearing a mask. I do it. Because now when I see people not wearing one, you're a monster. And there's a list. So with a statewide mask mandate, which Tony Evers has expanded, I probably should get to that in a second so we all have the same information about it. There's a number. When I say a number, I read the list a couple weeks ago, or more than that, a month or 2 months ago. If you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to wear one, because there's a list of legitimate excuses, because some counties and cities were really heavy-handed with enforcement. I don't know what we did in Milwaukee County, clearly not enough. But in Chicago, if you were out there lollygagging and gallivanting out there without a mask, you could get a $2,000 fine. Or maybe that if you were out after the stay-at-home order. But there were some cities that levied really huge fines and penalties for not cooperating. Do you see why? To try and tell people you're going to pay a price if you're not following these rules. Not to some people, that's fascism and communism and taking away your freedom. To other people, it's a patriotic duty. But I don't think that the enforcement was really there. Now, in the beginning, I didn't like to wear a mask, but I knew that when I went out in public, I had to. And so what it also did, because I really hated it. Because when I wear my glasses, and we didn't figure out, you got to wear your mask a certain way if you wear glasses, because when you exhale, your breath goes up and fogs up your lenses. I remember being at Meijer, I'm at the grocery store, I'm just bumping into bananas and avocados falling everywhere because I can't see. And I'm trying to grocery shop, I can't see what's on sale because my glasses are foggy, and you can't you take your glasses off and you got to wipe your glasses. It was a whole mess. But it also limited the amount of time that I was out in public. I didn't like to wear a mask, fair enough. At home, I don't have to wear one. But I got used to it. And then there were glimmers of hope that things were going to return back to normal. And then they warned of the second spike. So what we're dealing with now is a result of three things. Just carelessness. So it's utter carelessness and a lack of regard for other people. When you have people protesting, sometimes with guns, wearing a mask, there's no wonder why we are right now. But first it was Memorial Day. You guys remember Memorial Day? So we were still seeing moderate increases in the coronavirus nationwide. Cities were locked down. There were travel bans. If you were from certain cities and certain states, you literally couldn't go to other states. You can't go to Illinois. If you're from Wisconsin, you can't go to Chicago. You got to quarantine for 15 days. If you're in Chicago for non-work related reasons, they'll quarantine you in Chicago. And nobody wants to be quarantined in Chicago, surrounded by terrible football and mean people and bad drivers. What a nightmare. If you go to Chicago, you got to stay there because of the case spikes here in the state of Wisconsin. Let me get to the mask order here. I didn't like wearing a mask. That means I just stayed at home, which kept me out of the public. And I'll be honest with you guys. Memorial Day, I went to my parents' house. Really the only people I've seen are like really, really close friends and family. Like close friends, and that I'd have to say, well, if I get the Rona from you, I'll be okay with it because I love you just that much. And I don't have that many people to where I'm willing to get the Rona. I remember even having the precautions I had to take to get my ballot witnessed so I could vote in the April 7th election. It was terrible. One of my very, very good friends, I don't even know how to describe it. My storm door has these vents in it, and I had to take my ballot and slide it through the vent, and then everybody's wearing gloves, and I had a fire extinguisher just in case. It was a whole thing. But Memorial Day, I think people they had enough of it. They had enough of the lockdowns in March and the kids being out of school and the whole month of April and the disaster that our April 7th election was. People were just like, I've had enough. And then Memorial Day, which is essentially the start of summer, and people just said, screw it. And then there's always a lag of when the cases spike. But the other thing is people weren't getting tested. They weren't. And so the asymptomatic spreaders, at first, they were saying, yes, everybody needs to get tested. But then there was a period of time where the information coming from the CDC and the Trump administration and the FDA, if you don't have any symptoms, don't get tested. Like they actually put that information out to the public. So I'm trying to explain all the things that led to this never ending spike of the coronavirus. And here in Wisconsin, we should be more embarrassed than anybody else. It is a Republican controlled state that is negatively impacting the people in the state, especially in the city of Milwaukee. So you have Memorial Day, people are like, screw it, we're going to the beach. Well, floodgate broke, because once people got a taste of freedom, got a taste of being out of the house, got a taste of summertime, and then there was the other falsities that, oh, the sunlight kills the coronavirus. I even had a friend of mine that I've known for 20 years that lives in Virginia, and I hope they're not watching this. They're probably watching this. I need to stop doing that because I say stuff and then people watch it and they get real mad at me, but I don't care. I'm stuck in the house. And they wanted to hang out. I haven't seen them in a very long time. They live in Virginia, you see. They wanted to hang out. I was like, I'm not. You're not one of those people that I'm gonna hang out with because if I got the coronavirus from you, I don't want to get the Rona from you. And then they literally said, oh no, we'll go out in the sun because the sun kills the Rona. I don't even talk to that person anymore. They might be dead, quite honestly. And this is a Democrat, like a liberal person. Says, oh no, you ain't got to worry about the Rona. If we do things outside, I'm not. The thinking is what you have to be weary of. If people think a particular way about this virus, you can't fool with them because they'll murder you with their spittle. Their breath is murder droplets. Memorial Day, people out there partying. And so I think where we get false hope is people may have contracted the coronavirus. Memorial Day, this is just one example. I got other examples, don't you worry. And they were asymptomatic. And they went to the beach and they went on vacation on Memorial Day. And guess what? They didn't get sick. They didn't get the fever. They didn't get the cough, cough. They didn't get none of that. They didn't get the body aches and the other Rona symptoms. And so they just went back to normal and they were spreading it left and right. Then you had the 4th of July. People went crazy for the 4th of July. Then you had Labor Day. It was those holidays that just compounded the spread of this virus. If there's any good news, because New York handled it better than any other place in the nation, and now New York is not listed amongst the top states of new cases because they really got out in front of it. In fact, Governor Andrew Cuomo's response in the early days, because New York was this harbinger of what could come to any city in America, and that was bad. They had to compete. Like they had to bid on masks and PPE. Like this is what happens when you get a businessman president. But as much as I've tried to explain that with logic, it doesn't matter because we are in a post-logic society. That states that need to protect their frontline workers and even the cops that people say they love so much. If states have to spend money and then compete with neighboring states to buy equipment to protect first responders, then this is going to be an ultimate failure. The PPE was produced, and then we come to find out it was warehoused by the federal government, and then it was sold in batches to the highest bidder. They were making money off of the pandemic, but that shouldn't shock you. Ivanka Trump was selling shoes during a press conference, and Kellyanne Conway was trying to advertise jewelry when she was giving a press briefing. It is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. But this is how far the Trump administration will go to further their agenda. And it's not even an agenda, it's just him. He's alone in all of this. It seems like he has loyal subjects. They're afraid of him. Any man that's only surrounded by his family, there's a problem with that. And I don't even think some of his family members want to be around him, but they're afraid because when he is president, there is nowhere that they can go. And he's leading the coronavirus response. From NBC News, many parents are hesitant to give their kids a COVID-19 vaccine. What if schools require it? Michelle Vargas of Granite City, Illinois, has always vaccinated her 10-year-old daughter, Madison. They both typically get flu shots, but when a vaccine for the coronavirus eventually comes out, Vargas will not be giving it to her daughter, even if Madison's school district requires it. Quote, There's no way in hell I would be playing politics with my daughter's health and safety, said Vargas, 36, an online fitness instructor. If the public school Madison attends and loves, says the vaccine is mandatory, we would find other options. We've seen this before where schools require children to get vaccinated, the list of childhood vaccinations that they need so they don't become super spreaders of like polio, stuff we shouldn't even have anymore. There was a resurgence of the measles within the last 3 or 4 years. The measles, because parents are refusing to vaccinate their children, and because children don't social distance very well, you can't tell a 5-year-old not to trade his Incredible Hulk mask for their friend's Superman mask, and next thing you know, your child is coming home with a different mask. They're kids. Some parents were not able to enroll their kids in school because of their refusal to vaccinate them. Measles, mumps, rubella, measles, and we saw a spike in measles cases. Measles was killing people for the first time in like since the 80s. And if you have an anti-vaxxer sentiment and then you get a pandemic where one of the ways out is to wear a mask, which clearly is too inconvenient, and another way out of it is to get a vaccination, then and now the anti-vaxxers, don't they almost have more like reason because everything has been so politicized? I just think we're going to be in a lot of trouble here, guys. As pharmaceutical companies race to manufacture a COVID-19 vaccine, many people are weary of a shot that is working its way through the approval process at record speed during a highly politicized pandemic. While some professions could require employees to get the vaccine, experts say schools almost certainly will require students to, potentially setting the stage for a showdown between reluctant parents and education officials. And what it's going to do is, and I'm not going to sit here and say the kids don't get it. They do. There was like a child that was less than a year old that died from complications from the coronavirus. That happened. So children can get it. The younger the child, doesn't matter, they still can get it. But if they don't get, because kids get sick all the time anyway. I got friends that are elementary school teachers. During the school year, I need to stay away from them because kids, and they tell me this, I'm sure your kids are wonderful and your kids are very clean and your kids wash their hands every time they come in the house from playing with dirt and picking up dead raccoons and bringing it. Little children are filthy, and it's because they don't know any better. And it's also because their parents are filthy too. But kids are just they do stuff. They do things that as adults, they know they shouldn't do, but as kids, they do filthy, yuck things, and they spread germs. I stay away from my elementary school teacher friends during the school year because they get the flu 7 times a month. They just get the flu every Thursday and Tuesday mornings. Dreadful. Governor Tony Evers issues a new COVID-19 emergency order, extends statewide mask mandate. This one is from Madison.com. With positive COVID-19 cases surging in college communities across the state, Governor Tony Evers has extended the statewide mask mandate through late November. So we're going to have a state mask mandate past the election November 3rd. So I think you know what that means. If you go to the polls, expect the lines to be long because I think that there is something in the air that's going to cause higher voter turnout this November. I don't know. Could be a hunch. Call me crazy. So there's that. And if we're still under a mask mandate, then social distancing will still be enforced and required. So the lines that we saw in April in Milwaukee, and we made national news for that, is going to be nothing compared to the lines at the polls on November 3rd because 5 times the people are probably going to vote. And with reduced turnout in April for a variety of reasons, a lot of people just don't vote in April elections. Some people didn't want to vote for the presidential primary candidates, or there were no local elections they wanted to vote for. Even with the number of people that stayed home in April, the lines were outrageous. They're going to be even longer come November. And I just want people to be prepared for that. Now, what the city is doing is they're giving a lot of additional opportunity to vote early. We've also been telling people not to vote by mail just because that's been politicized too, just like the coronavirus vaccine. There will be a number of drop boxes in the city of Milwaukee. People have contacted me that live outside of the city of Milwaukee. I would suggest you contact your mayor or your village trustee or your election officials or your election commission in your respective jurisdiction, because everybody is doing it differently. But this also is a call for change because there is no federal standard for how we administer elections. There isn't one. States can decide, like Minnesota, and maybe I read this wrong. I guess I probably could type it in right now and research it, but that requires too many things. Like there's no limit on when you can send your ballot back if you're voting in Minnesota. Where I think we have our postmark date can't be after the election. We need some kind of federal call to change the way we administer elections. But right now, why don't we talk to Dr. Monique Liston? Make sure we got her here. Dr. Liston, there she is. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm glad you could join us. You are hosting a panel discussion this evening, and it's such a timely subject matter, and I'm glad I have this opportunity to speak with you. And it's a part of the Minority Health Film Festival, and it's called We've Been Here, Women of Color Fighting for Justice. And so I have my thoughts and opinions on that. I'm going to withhold some of those as best I can. But as we're seeing more people get off the sidelines and get off the couch, especially in the wake of the George Floyd murder, all of these new people and new activists that are coming to the fold, Dr. Liston, are you seeing with some of these new people that are getting involved that they are either intentionally or unintentionally ignoring or disrespecting the people that have been doing this work, but were never getting credit for it prior to?
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. And I don't think it is intentional. I think it's a product of how we have been kind of taught to erase people who don't do traditional politics, right? And so when you have mothers organizing, young people organizing, queer folks organizing, they're often put to the sides because it's like we're used to a male narrative, a white narrative, one that really upholds kind of the status quo. So I don't think it's intentional most of the time. It's just that we're sort of socialized to think if it's not white, if it's not male, that we shouldn't follow it. So I think it's sort of a season of reckoning, where these folks are like, well, we've been here. So now we have to engage and understand that we've been here just doesn't mean follow us. We've been here means understand what we've done and take this further.
Can you tell us about the panel? I know there are a couple of associated films with the panel, but what are going to be some of the topics you guys are going to discuss during the panel this evening at 7?
Absolutely. So the two films are And She Could Be Next, which talks about women of color in electoral politics, and Radical Monarchs, which is the story of a troupe of young Black and brown girls in Oakland and how they sort of parents and community members have radicalized them through sort of similar to a Girl Scout troop experience. And so we have an amazing panel. We have Tracy Corder, who's also featured in the And She Could Be Next film, a native Milwaukeean who also has a history in electoral politics, both local and national. Shavonda Sisson, who is the leader of Love on Black Women, who has built a very important social media following and activist around both voting and both understanding marginalized Black folks. And then Zion Rogers, a young person who, if she told me to do anything, I will follow her direction because she is on point.
Does it seem like there is an attempt to change the narrative of how women of color organize? Because we know when this different diversity comes into the fold and they want to give money, they want to get out there and hit the streets, they've got their Black Lives Matter signs, and they may get involved and say, well, you know what, maybe we should do it this way, or why don't you guys try this, or maybe you should lower your tone when you're out there yelling and screaming in the streets. First of all, does that happen? Number one. Number two, that seems like it would be so frustrating that you might even want to exclude those additional bodies in the movement because they're trying to commandeer it based upon their myopic view of culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it absolutely happens. And we know it happens because not just in politics, it happens in the professional space. Black people are definitely policed no matter how they show up, right? At my own home, people are like, well, should you be talking like that? Should you be wearing that? Should you show up with your hair like that? And I think that sort of resistance against always thinking about what's wrong with Black folks, what's wrong with brown folks, is what has driven some people into the political sphere. As in, I'm tired of you always trying to negotiate my living, my dignity, my humanity. So I'm actually going to take charge of this situation and go against it. And I think to your second question around resistance towards people who are telling you to do differently, I think what's happening in this moment is that those folks are recognized, or we're highlighting that those folks are about everyone getting what they need to live a dignified life. They're about maintaining their own power, maintaining the status quo, maintaining their own class politics. And so I think that's beginning to bubble up in a way that's not allowing them to get into the fold very easy.
Dr. Liston, there are a number of troubling things that I personally witnessed with the movements and the protests that I saw this summer. First and foremost, it's all very encouraging to see so many people come out into the streets and have their voices heard for the injustices that they've always seen, but have done little more than post on Facebook. It's the problem we have with intersectionality. Black folks need as many people in the fold as possible, but what I saw was an incredible amount of homophobia. When other folks that have issues and face injustice as well want to get involved, but then they're cast aside, or there are other marginalized groups, maybe because of their religion, they're not necessarily, fitting the description of who some people want in the movement. And things get more complicated, as you know, when you get more people because they bring more issues to the table. How do we, I guess, conceptualize the different people that come into the movements and then not having discrimination in an anti-discrimination movement?
Mhm. I think the first thing is breaking down the idea that there's only one movement to be a part of. There are several, and just like we've been here sort of articulates, this work is ongoing, and the opportunity to get involved is always present. I think the other thing is, we got to change the narrative and challenge the narrative that we're not including this demographic of people, right? We're not including queer folks. We are homophobic, and stop centering the folks who are problematic. What we need to do is say, we have queer leaders in this movement. You need to learn how to coalesce and grow around them. We have women and non-binary folks leading this movement. You need to learn how to follow them. And so we're not centering the folks that are problematic. We are centering the leaders who are trying to hold everybody in the intersectional identities that they hold, particularly amongst Black folks, and making sure that we are redirecting sort of our historic narrative that has led, particularly in Black and brown communities, where we have allowed males to control a narrative that's not necessarily true when you actually get to the ground. So even when we get to who is popular based on the protest, and you go look who's actually organizing on the ground, you then see a different set of folks. So I think it's challenging that narrative and really being connected to who's actually organizing, not just who's popular.
Perfect example of that. After Donald Trump was elected, largely with the help of white women, there was a series of women's protests in which we come to find out that African-American women were organizing those protests, but were not given the credit. Like, their names weren't on the bill. Their names weren't on the chyron running at the bottom of our news broadcast. That's a very, very real thing. And I had no idea, because I saw all of these women all over the country that were leading whatever the chapters of the organizations were called. But then I come to find out later, no, it was Black women that planned all of those organizing activities in the wake of Donald Trump's election. That's still a major problem. How do we address that?
Mm-hmm. We have a huge problem with media narratives, right? The media likes to hook onto a narrative that doesn't challenge us intellectually, doesn't make us think, doesn't educate us. And so because of that, that means we're resting on what always has been true, as opposed to disrupting and letting the truth and learning new things that are different than the narratives that we hold actually shine, i.e. Black women have been doing this organizing. They were behind it. White women are lazy when it comes to most of the intellectual work around electoral politics, and they're to blame for a lot of the work that's happening. And so people are putting that out to the forefront. I think that we need more allyship towards that. So we have the media voices who are able to share that narrative. I think about the allies, both to Black and Brown communities, to Black and Brown women, to all the marginalized genders, who then could say, hey, if I'm assuming that this male or this white person is the person who's a part of this, I should challenge myself to think deeper and who is the Black or brown person or woman behind them that might actually be getting this off the ground. And I think we need to put that charge into our media, into our journalists, into our newscasters to do that kind of legwork when they're investigating and reporting.
The conversation is tonight at 7 p.m. We've been here, Women of Color Fighting for Justice. It can be streamed on the Milwaukee Film YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook pages, informed by the MHFF films We Are the Radical Monarchs and She Could Be Next, Part 1 and Part 2. And all of these films are available on the Milwaukee Film Festival, their website, the virtual screenings of these films. This panel brings together local and national Black women activists to talk about their experiences working for change, organizing strategies, and ways to sustain radical change. Panelists include Tracy Corder, Siobhan Sisson, Zion Rogers, and I'm joined by the moderator, Dr. Monique Liston. Dr. Liston, how much of this is a response and has to be a response to the Donald Trump takeover of America? Because there are the issues that Black people have always been fighting for, but then some of them have been accelerated and exacerbated by Trump. So how much of the organizing that is necessary, it has to be political, even though it might be local, it might be social issues, it might be civil rights issues. At the end of the day, it has to be political as well. So is there a movement within the movement to make sure that, if you've got a bunch of people that are interested in working for justice but not registered to vote, then change is going to be fleeting? So is there a political aspect to organizing these days?
Always, every single breath a Black person takes is a political miracle. And so when we think about how we organize, we need to understand what are the different ways in which we can impact the system. I think what's most important is that we understand that voting is a strategy, not the strategy. I think we have learned that historically, and we have to act accordingly. I think what also comes along with that, like I said before, white folks, white-led organizations are intellectually lazy when it comes to political organizing work. And so they lean into Black and brown folks organizing their communities, as opposed to white folks organizing the white folks that they don't talk to in those rural areas, who are actually Trump's backbone. And that's not a Black person's job for any reason. That's not their job. And we also should not be putting that weight onto Black and brown folks, thinking that the narrative of change in this political sphere is on them. Right? We make up not enough of the population to make that change. White folks have no business in being in Black and brown communities talking about the ways we're politically organizing. They need to go into their own communities, particularly the relatives they don't talk to anymore, those elders that they haven't spoken to. And those are the votes that they need to engage, and leave Black and brown organizing to the Black and brown organizers who are doing it.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I just, somebody sent me a meme still blaming Black folks in Milwaukee for Donald Trump winning the state of Wisconsin. Sherwin, is this true? 93,000 of you Black people failed to go and vote in 2016. And so I had to count to 10 and calm myself, because I try and be tactful these days, even though it's hard. And I said, you know what, it could be a number even higher than that. But why don't we look at the number of white folks, including white women, who are getting, the short end of the stick by voting for Trump in the first place? Let's look at the number of them that actually did go and vote for Donald Trump, instead of African Americans that may not cast a vote. Because the other thing is, Black people are not a monolith, and I hate having to repeat that. Just because a number of Black people go and vote, there's no guarantee that all of them are going to vote for the Democratic candidate. So that's that. But the other thing that I've noticed is how white folks will make up excuses for their racist mother, father, uncle, and just say, well, that's just how they are. There's nothing we can do about that. To some extent, isn't that the problem? Because we as Black people, we engage with our folks when they're on the wrong side of the political spectrum, or on, whatever the sentiment of the community is. If our folks are on the wrong side, we have that dialogue at the dinner table, at Thanksgiving, where white folks will say, well, there's just nothing we can do about that. And isn't that cavalier attitude toward blatant racism of members in their families, in their social circles, part of the problem?
Absolutely. And I think that that ill-conceived notion that is based upon shared numbers ignores our political reality. When Trump was elected, he did not win the popular vote. So we need to stop trying to hook it onto it's sheer numbers that would have determined this. No, no, no. It's the political will of the white rural areas that no one's politically engaging, making them think critically about their own experiences politically that actually need to be addressed. No, no population of Black or brown folks anywhere in this country was the determining factor for Trump's election.
Dr. Liston, can you tell us about Ubuntu Research and Evaluation?
Absolutely. Ubuntu Research and Evaluation is a professional learning community of Black women. We use strategies of beloved community, justice, and liberation to work with organizations either through evaluation or facilitation to think about critical questions around race. Are we doing racial equity right? Are we thinking consciously or intentionally about the racial implications of our policy or programming? Could we be increasing our capacity to think about race more often? And our work extends into public health, public education, nonprofit and foundation work. We are located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we are working nationally, hopefully internationally soon, to really move forward the race consciousness with a intentionality on thinking about the intersections of Black identity.
How can people either get involved or get more information about Ubuntu Research and Evaluation? Is there a phone number, website?
Absolutely. Our website is Ubuntu, UBUNTU research.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where you'll probably get the most engagement. We have an awesome social media strategist. And you also can send us an email, learn@ubunturesearch.com.
What does a post-Trump, post-George Floyd, post-coronavirus world look like? I would like to think that because of what we all have seen and experienced collectively in 2020, that there will be better outcomes for the future. I just don't know what it's going to look like because I'm so consumed by the trees that I can't yet see the forest. Ideally, what do things look like? Are communities more tight knit? Is voter turnout higher? Does the intersectionality help fortify movements instead of tear them down? And I know that's a huge question, but I need some kind of clarity because it feels like I'm just tumbling through the world right now. And I'd like to know, your opinion on, what the post-Trump era looks like if we take all of this work and we have measurable outcomes. What do you think that looks like?
Absolutely. I am informed around this, thinking about what John Henrik Clarke, historian and Pan-African intellectual, has said about history, right? Like, we have to know our political time of day. And if we understand our political time of day, we know that the last 500 years of America's existence is only the hours between 11:55 and midnight on terms of the whole political history of humanity. And when we start to think about that, we understand that it's not just the 5 minutes that determines the day. We have to look at everything else. And so I'm also holding it close to me, the intellectual work of Christina Sharp, who wrote this book called In the Wake on Blackness and Being. And what she reminds us is that as Black folks in America in particular, we are living in the wake of all of the Black bodies, the Black people who have died since the ascent of this country began. And so when we look at what your question is asking about post this moment, I don't think it's post this moment as an isolated incident. It's the continuous wake of the harm that has happened. And so what we're looking at on the other side of us is what we would do in a wake. When someone passes, there's a lot of mourning and tears. There's also a lot of laughter and joy. Right. And that when people leave after the wake, after the funeral, it'll be like, oh, I'm so glad I saw so-and-so, or, it was great, or we should do this more often. It shouldn't be around a funeral. And I'm sure you have heard some of those same things around family members when you visit. And I think that's the kind of conversation that we're going to have. Like, I'm glad we're here. We're still mourning. We still have work to do, but I appreciate what we're able to cultivate, and let's keep working. So I think about that as being a part of our long, and like you said, that's the forest in this situation as we get caught up in the trees that are a part of our everyday lives.
Presented by the Minority Health Film Festival. We've been here, Women of Color Fighting for Justice, a panel discussion this evening at 7 p.m. until 8 p.m. It's a virtual discussion where you can go to mkefilm.org/MHFF. This morning's guest, Dr. Monique Liston. It's been an absolute pleasure. Dr. Liston. Good luck with the panel tonight, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Sounds great. Have a great day.
You too. That's it, guys. I'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a good one.